So when you have your rings made, so you made your spring, and then you have carefully taken the rings off of there by twisting off as we showed, so you got the nice flat edges. The next step is to actually put them together. Now, there are two basic designs that you use for Western types of chainmail. One is a 4-in-1 pattern, and that is what you use for making a sheet. So if you see on a shirt or something like that, actually I can show it right here, so you can get a little close up. So the 4-in-1 pattern runs like this, and if you look at this, you can see that it's actually running in rows, so that it looks like the rings are sort of leaned one direction in one row, and then the next row they lean back the other direction. So they alternate back and forth. And if you look closely at it, you can see that each ring has 4 rings going through it. That's why it's called a 4-in-1 pattern. It's also sometimes called single mail. And then in the Middle Ages, they did something where they would put 6 rings in one, and that was called double mail. Or they could do 8 rings in one, and that was called triple mail. Often they did this when they made shirts so that they could have a stronger area. Like they might do double mail over your vital organs, right? To make that stronger. In case you get shot by a crossbow bolt there, it's going to keep it from penetrating. You're going to be probably bruised, but they did wear padding under the chainmail to help with that kind of thing. Now, that's the first basic pattern, is the 4-in-1, which could also be made into the 6-in-1, 8-in-1 with a little variation. The other basic pattern is what I call a spiral, and here's an example of that. Basically, what you want to do with a spiral, depending on the diameter of your wire and the diameter of your rings, you have to figure out your mathematics, your geometry for how many rings you want to put. But you start with 1 in the middle, which you can see here, and then this pattern I actually did 7 around the middle ring. You might need to do 6 or 8 depending on the size of your rings and so on. But basically the idea is start with 1 in the middle, and then you have 7, 6 or 8, something like that around that. And they go around in one row. So we looked at in the flat pattern, they were all sort of, the rows alternate back and forth. So in this they were going to alternate back and forth, so the first row outside of that one ring sort of leans, it looks like to me now that it's going clockwise, and then the next will lean back counterclockwise, and vice versa. But when you're doing this pattern, I've got 1 ring in the middle, I've got 7 in the next row, and then outside of that I again put 7 through. But then I need to expand it, because this is going to get bigger and bigger. So in that second row of 7, I went back and I put an extra ring in between each of the rings that were already there. So that meant that I made it 14 in that third row. So then I did another row of 14 outside of that, and then I went and I alternated every other one putting an extra ring in. So then I made that row 21 rings. Alright, so then I did another row of 21, and then I went back through, and every few rings I put another, and basically I expanded it to 28 that time. Okay? So depending on what size rings you're working with, you have to work out the geometry of how your expansion is going to go, but you're expanding it a little bit at a time as you go. So I ended up on the outside ring of this, it was 28, and then I put these points on, and so this, I used to make this and sell like throwing discs. Some of them were like circles and some were more like this, which is a star. So it kind of wads up in your hand. But when you throw it, it spins out into a star shape. And this was one of the popular things that like kids would always like to buy at my shop. I also did bags and jewelry. I did like plant hangers. I did shirts, of course, but shirts take forever. The coifs. I did mantles, which are pieces that go over your shoulders. All kinds of different things. So that's it for how you put it together.